kick this off, I believe we are transitioning to the student panel portion. So what I would like to do is have each of our panelists introduce themselves as they would like to a group. And just to start as maybe an introductory question as you're introducing yourself, also share with the group why you chose to attend UMass Boston. So I will pass it along to who would like to start? Maybe Asa?
Hi, sure. I'd be happy to start. So I'm Asa Peters. I'm a first year in the Critical Ethnic and Community Studies program, and happy to be here. And it's been a good year to me, I think. I would say I actually sort of came to UMass Boston definitely by way of some of my family and Native connections. A little of both, really. But yeah, I'm a member of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, and I have roots in the Narragansett tribe. Forgot to mention that. Yeah, my father has had a long-term relationship with Cedric, actually, and my father was referring me to a different program, actually, or saying, "Oh, maybe you should check this out." Which then eventually led me to say, oh, let me look at this, some critical ethnic and community studies, like this might be really speaks to me. So yeah, I guess that's how I got here. I have some roots in music and studying botany and stuff, but I think I came to UMass Boston and to my program trying to do some work and some learning and research that centers a little bit more on my own identities. So yeah, and I'll pass it to Jane Ann.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jane Ann. I mentioned this earlier today, but I'm nannying right now, so pardon the screams because they are inevitable. As I said before, I'm Jane Ann. I'm a fourth year student majoring in English and minoring in secondary education. And I'm of the Menominee Nation in northern Wisconsin. Came to UMass mostly kind of just to like branch out and experience the East Coast. And I was fortunate enough to attend a university that has a great students, Native Studies department at We Do, and fortunate enough to meet all the wonderful professors and everyone that we have on staff. Something that like really stuck out to me during the presentation was highlighting that not all Native students or not all that Native students or Indigenous peoples in general know the like forefront of the news of other nations, and that was something that was really kind of important to me because it is kind of the like leading questions that people ask where you're like, oh, well, what's happening on Mauna Kea right now in Hawaii, or what is happening on the Lakota Nation with the access pipeline, or any of the various injustices that are going on right now throughout Native experiences in the U.S. and beyond. So yeah, I mean, I just like really want to also thank you for highlighting the various issues that you brought to the forefront. But yeah, that's my sharing. Sorry for the craziness.
Thank you, Jane Ann. And I actually appreciate you coming as you are. And also, hello, babies. Good to see you. So I think is Sarah also on the call? We can pass to Sarah.
I don't know if she was able to make
Okay.
it today.
All right, just a quick, I haven't been able to scan the rest of the participant list. I think it's, sorry, just a moment. Kelly, is Kelly also on the call? Okay, doesn't look like it. So that might be all of us. Is that right? Just confirming really quickly. All right, I'm seeing Mike do a head nod, so I appreciate that. All right, thank you. I apologize. It's a little harder to see and navigate in our virtual Zoom world, even though we've been like this for a while. So the next question I would like to pass to our student colleagues is, what supports have you found to be helpful in your success as a student on our campus?
I can chime in for a sec. I think well, this has been my first year and learning remotely. So I think I certainly have one perspective on things. But I don't know. To some extent, I feel like maybe I don't know the full extent of supports or what the institutions that are in place, both the academic department and the institute. And the just broader community of Native and Indigenous people or allies. What that feels like physically on campus, I'm not really sure. But I will say that I am definitely super grateful for Native and Indigenous staff and faculty, fellow students and allies, and collaborating professors. I think sort of like my introduction actually to UMass Boston was like early last fall and late summer, when folks were trying to push for Columbus Day to be recognized as Indigenous Peoples Day, and that was sort of like the first time I sort of like met anybody, So that was actually nice, like to get kind of linked in and see, in addition to other Native students, staff and faculty, there's quite a network of folks, non-Native folks as well, with sort of allied interests, that ended up, a lot of them are also my professors in my department, or in kind of related family departments. So at least in that sense, I just feel a certain sense of like community support from people with good intentions for me and other people like me.
Yeah, I guess I kind of just would really like to echo what Asa said. It's mostly it comes down to the community and the network of people that we have on campus. Obviously, I have a couple more years as senior, so that is I kind of haven't really had a different experience from him. Honestly, I don't think that the university has done anything specifically that has really impacted the Native student population on campus. I mean, obviously, we had that big push to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, which was great. That the results went the way that we wanted to. And being a member of the Native and Indigenous Student Association on campus, we've really tried to push to have more community outreach and plan some events that would bring people together and kind of just like introduce people. And of course, that's been a little harder than we would like, but there's also like so much red tape that like goes through and around the student groups on campus when it comes to funding and when it comes to honestly just marketing and networking and telling people, hey, we're here, like we want Native students on campus to feel welcome and safe. And it's just been really difficult, especially when the support that the Native Studies department gives us is like 100%, but when the university is not like supporting in the same way,
Stereotype. Yeah.
So
Well, it's a stereotype because
very hard to, I guess, work through and work around when you're trying to build a community and create a safe space for Native students.
Thanks, Jana. That actually is a really nice transition into the next question we were thinking about is if there was something you could change at UMass Boston, maybe to help make it easier to create community or to cultivate some of those spaces that you were talking about, what changes would you like to see?
He said, do you want to go, or is it okay if I go?
You can go ahead if you got something. I'm still kind of thinking. So
Okay. I guess for me, something that really sticks out is just having like an overall, just more of like an overall approach to the Native student population, not just, not just like asking about current events or not just being interested in Native students when something significant happens in current events, but it's the like overall just like reaching out and saying like, here are these resources, here are these programs that we have in place specifically for Native students. And additionally, coming up with those programs, you know, cultivating those programs, maybe like looking into creating like a study center specifically for Native students, or even just a community base that we could instill throughout the university and just have it overall become more welcoming to Native students, and then also in turn promoting awareness about current events and about injustices that Native and Indigenous peoples face like on a daily, which goes hand in hand with not putting the responsibility on the Native and Indigenous students or peoples to educate others on current issues.
yeah, I completely agree. I don't know. I don't think I have too much to add to things to add or change. But I did really, sorry, I was just looking at some notes I was taking earlier. I did really appreciate the things that Shelley was sharing about making sure that like members of the community, not just for Native people and Indigenous people, understand the history around here, but also for faculty and staff. It could be helpful, and I feel like there's like, I feel like in almost any office or like any department, there's some way that you can center or contextualize like the presence of Indigenous peoples in your work one way or another, or bring your resources in that direction. But that's very general, so yeah.
I think those were both really good insights. I appreciate you sharing that. I also might pass it to Dr. Lowe for a related question too, because we talked about making spaces more welcoming. So how have you seen campuses make their spaces more welcoming for Native students? You shared a bit about that in your talk, but are there some specific examples you could share with us?
Yeah, I think that, you know, one of the things that we need to think about campuses, and I love visiting other campuses. I'm kind of a nerd about campus layouts. And, you know, because you can go to some campuses and they're beautiful and they're manicured. And, you know, you have to kind of think about what is it that I see, right? What are the statues that I see? What's the artwork that I see? What do I see on the walls? What do I see in the classrooms? I think that a lot of our institutions rely on this real rich history, cultural history of the institutions, right? My institution in particular. And we don't display or show the real diverse culture of our institutions, right? So we need to be able to see Native culture on the walls. We need to be able to see Native culture represented visually or, you know, in other ways physically on campus as a start, right? And you know, if you, I just, you know, I encourage you to take a moment when you guys can get back to campus, right? Don't go there now if you're not allowed, because I'm not allowed on campus. You have a sense of walking through and what do you see? And what And when you see what you see, what does that tell you about the institution, right? The culture of the institution, who makes up the institution, who belongs at the institution. So that's one part. The second part is understanding what are the, there are some things that are just really key for our Native students to have access to on campus. So in our office, there's always tobacco, loose tobacco. We always have sweetgrass. We always have sage. We have cedar. We have feathers, right? We have matches. Like there are little things that students come in and I don't have this. Do you guys have it? Yes, we do. We have this. Even just things like food and coffee. Just some things that they are used to having back home or having easy access to. One thing that we figured out this a couple of years ago, we had a new faculty member come in and we needed to purchase some things for her kind of welcoming feast. And I went to go and purchase some cloth. It was so weird. Cloth. I just needed to go purchase a couple yards of cloth. And my Harvard credit card wouldn't allow me to purchase cloth. And it was some weird policy that it wasn't one of the acceptable items to be purchasing through Harvard. But I had to kind of, so I had to pay for myself and I had to get reimbursed. And we had to have this long conversation about why do I need to have access to purchasing something like cloth? And, it's the same thing for students there, get a good sense. You can even ask them, what are some of the things that you readily have access to at home or in your community that we could make available and make it easier for you to access when you're here on campus? And let them know that one, you can get those things and figure out how to get them. But two, where can the students find them on campus, right? Where can they go to make sure that they have the ability to access these things? We can talk also about, policies that are on campus. And I can't recall whether or not UMass Boston is a tobacco-free campus, but tobacco-free for a lot of students is difficult because tobacco is used for prayer. Tobacco is used on a daily basis, and maybe not necessarily for smoking, but they get this sense that, oh, I can't have this part of my cultural identity on campus, right? What am I supposed to do if I can't have this? So kind of taking a look at just, some of the simple things. What do they have access to? But what does it look like? What is your campus showing when a student walks around and sees it for the first time?
Thank you very much. I also will toss it back to our students too. And this, I think, builds off of what you were speaking to around being able to support students towards their goals and their specific needs on our campus too. So for our current students, what are you hoping to do after you graduate, or what are you thinking about in the context of your degree?
Go ahead, Asa.
Okay. I'll go quick. Well, first, real quick, I'll just say to Dr. Lowe that I really echo that statement about the kind of the space that things take and building spaces for people to go to. Like just you talking about, having the medicine plants and coffee, even, or food or something, and having a place for that. Sounds like it's just so endearing and like, wow, like something I wish I had in my undergrad experience too, and especially with the plants. So yeah, but then in terms of my goals, I'm definitely kind of unclear myself, but I think my master's program is really building shaping some of my priorities. Really interested in food sovereignty. In my communities. I'm also very interested in different types of storytelling, history keeping, or building archives, and sort of recognizing community knowledge, like for what it is, so that people who are inspired to look at it and celebrate it right now or in the future can do so joyfully. Anything that contributes to that. I'm also really interested in like indigenous people's relations to the land around them, and for migrating peoples and displaced people's relationships to the land and nature around them. Those are just my interests though, but my goals would be to work and continue to develop those priorities in the context of my own communities.
Yeah, for me, my goal is hopefully to graduate within the next year and possibly return to the res and or other Native nations and provide teaching support at first, and then maybe go ahead and open up a community center of some sort. For now, teaching, I'm gonna not dream so big right away, but just building a community and providing opportunities and providing Native students with somebody who can relate to them in multiple different ways, and also showing support for other community members, and just basically just build a community and showing Native students that it's not impossible and that it can be done. Fingers crossed within the year that I can for sure say that, but and giving kids on the res just like somebody that's there for them and somebody to look up for them, and also kind of echoing what Ace is saying about food sovereignty and like spreading the word about Native and Indigenous health concerns within the area and public health concerns. But yeah, that's that's all I got so far. It's kind of a work in progress here.
I can relate to that too as a first year doc student. I kind of feel like that dog and up where it's like squirrel, because I'm learning so much and digging into so many different topics, especially with all the brilliant Native scholars and community members, especially in higher education. So definitely resonated with both of your comments there. So with my student hat on, I can say like I'm right there with you in the same boat, especially wrapping up this semester. And then Dr. Lowe, I know you started talking about this briefly, but mentioning some types of policies and procedures. So I think we could either look at the ones that feel like barriers for students when they're on campus, or ones that you feel like are really facilitating student success. So I guess I'll leave it up to you to feel like which ones you'd like to highlight.
Okay, let's see. I think one of the things that we just had a student panel a week and a half ago, and the students were very clear that there needs to be a lot more flexibility for them to be able to access their tribal languages and their tribal cultural learning while they're on campus. And this is very particular to the language issue I think we talked about, that very often students don't want to learn another colonial language, right? They don't want to learn another settler language. They want to learn their language. And there's a very good reason why they would want to learn. And there's a very good reason why we should support them learning that language, right? It's a part of their identity. And we do find that students that are more in tune to their cultural understandings, cultural ways, have access to those things and their language while they're in college. The better they do, the more grounded they are. So being able to be a lot more flexible in how they have access to courses and knowledge gaining outside of your institution. So creating really great partnerships with other institutions, or figuring out how to create partnerships with other institutions who might offer these courses, so that students can take the courses at a remote location or another institution, but still get credit within your institution, right? So that's one, really, understanding what it is the students are needing and wanting to learn, why it is they're wanting to learn it, and finding avenues to either create that opportunity on campus or find ways for them to connect to other institutions while they're still a student at your institution. The other policies I think that a lot of institutions are looking at now, not specifically just for Native students, but particularly as we looked at what does it mean to move to all remote, what does it mean to assume that everybody has the same access to internet and everything that they might need at home, but also how do we deal with this idea of test scores, right? So entry test scores, SATs, MCATs, GMAT, you know, all of these things that GREs that we expect students to take. We know that students who come from lower performing, lower resources schools are not going to do as well on these tests as other students. It doesn't mean that they cannot do well in the institution. So how do we change our policies and rethink how we use those things like test scores to assess where and how well a student might do within our institutions, right? And so there are schools now that are getting rid of test scores, right? They're not going to be requiring SAT scores. They're not going to be requiring graduate level examination scores for admissions. And I think that that's really going to change, and it's going to help students gain a little bit more access into our institutions, but also, you know, enter almost on a much more even keel. And that's hard to say because students often come in and, you know, depending on your institution, the first thing they want to say is, well, I scored this much on this exam. And, you know, you're already kind of creating this hierarchy of students that we don't necessarily need to be creating within our institutions. We want to support all students equally and have them come in and have rich learning experiences. So how do we think about the policies and guidelines that our institutions have? The other kind of part was what I talked about in terms of, well, we don't want to resource you with this much funding because you're a small population. I think we find that our students, they have such great ideas. They want to do such great things on campus. And when they go and try to find the little pockets of money to do this, you know, they can piece it together often. But then we have other student groups who get tons of money to do events because they've either always done them and the institution's used to it, or the institution, you know, sees that, oh, it brings all these students in or something. And the institution is much more willing to give support to these other groups as opposed to really helping these poor, you know, fledgling students who are just trying to get this really great event together. We need to be able to support them regardless, right? Regardless of the size of their student group, regardless of the size of the event that they're bringing in, because it's really important. And we should be participating. We should be encouraging others to get involved with the things that the Native students are doing, because it's really important and we'd all learn greatly from it. So I think those are a couple of things that I would really point to.
Wonderful. I absolutely agree. And now I will turn it to Cedric for a little summary, and then we'll move to our next portion.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I really want to thank the panelists, Shelley, Asa, Jane Ann, and thank you for your facilitation, Rachel. Really important to hear what seems to be a carry through item on all three is the importance of establishing relationships versus transactional interactions between students, staff, faculty, but long-term sustainable reciprocal relationships between communities and the institution, between faculty and students, between faculty and the communities, and a greater awareness, and to Jane Ann's point, intentionality in terms of supporting Native students, scholarship about Native people, and all things which benefit Native communities. So I want to thank you all for centering those and bringing those here into this space as part of this conversation. And I think, Rachel, back to you for